So something that people ask me about a lot is how I have come to start my business, leave the corporate world, transition from being an interior designer, and then starting this online platform, education platform where I've made nearly $5 million in 3 years. And people just ask about the sort of different steps that have been involved in that journey all the time. And so what I wanted to do today is share a bit of a sort of personal story of exactly the steps that I've taken along the way with my own development of my business and everything that I've done to sort of get to where I am today, and just make this a resource that I can then link people to when they ask me this question, which does happen a lot. And also just because I've talked about it in snippets all over the place and never really perhaps put the whole story together. So I thought I would just put the story together. It feels very self-indulgent to make a video like this. I am not someone who likes talking about myself, but I guess I'm doing it because when I was sort of starting my business, I used to really look up to people who I felt were a little further ahead in their journey than I was, and especially women and especially mothers who were juggling a lot of stuff, because there's lots of sort of people on the internet who don't seem to have a lot going on, or younger people who are able to do really like successful things, but you think, well, they don't have an awful lot going on, so they can sort of put a lot of time into this stuff. So I, used to look up to videos like this and just really find them so interesting to hear about the stories of people. So I thought, as self-indulgent as it feels, and as much as I hate to sort of talk about myself, I will put a video like this together and share my story with you of my journey from corporate world all the way through to this sort of massive, fantastic business that I love to work in, and brings me a lot of joy and hopefully brings a lot of value to lots of people in the world as well. So I'll just start a few steps back. I studied classical music in university. I went to a music school here in Sydney called the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. I was studying the oboe. I did my undergraduate degree in Sydney at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music as well. I did very well in that degree and ended up getting some scholarships that allowed me to go over and study at the Royal College of Music in London, and I studied the oboe there as well. When I got to the RCM in London, I realised that even though I had come from Australia, being probably one of the better oboists in Australia at the time, at my age, I got to London and I realised that everyone in my university cohort was just as good as me at playing the oboe, if not better, and many of them were much, much better, and I suddenly felt just completely out of my depth with the whole thing. I'd never really loved music. I'd done music because I was good at it, and I liked the sort of identity sort of praise stuff that came with just being good at something, which is just a normal sort of thing when you're a young person. And so I'd always just really done it because I had just been good at it, fallen into it. My parents are both musicians. It was just sort of a natural progression. I got there and I realized I actually hate the oboe. I actually hate performing. I'm actually a very nervous person who just the performance side of playing was just so nerve-wracking for me. I got no enjoyment out of performing in public, and that's a bit of a problem if you're going to be a professional musician. So I decided while I was there I really didn't want to do that anymore. I fell into an academic sort of stream in terms of doing an academic master's thesis while I was there, and found this really great supervisor who I was working with, who then invited me on to stay and do a doctorate there at the College of Music in an academic area on performance anxiety. So on this issue that I had suffered from personally in terms of my own, stuff with performance anxiety and things like that. So I started that. I got another scholarship, luckily, to do that program. And I did part of that program. My mum ended up getting breast cancer. I was very homesick. I didn't really like living away from home. I'm a Cancerian homebody at heart, and I just eventually decided none of it was for me, and made a very, very difficult decision at the time because I was letting my parents down, or I felt I was letting my parents down, and just sort of letting a lot of people down, my supervisor down and things, and I had to make this really heart-wrenching, difficult decision to return back to Australia, which I did. So I came back to Australia in my early 20s, and this is feeling like a long way away from 20 years, but I'll try and speed this part of the process up. But I think that background's sort of helpful because I think some of the stuff I learned from being a musician in terms of my work ethic that I put into practicing 4 hours a day, 3 or 4 hours a day, every single day for probably 15 years is a lot of what's made me the sort of person that I am today, who puts a lot of discipline and daily effort into things even when I don't feel like them. So I built that muscle a lot when I was a teenager and when I was a young person, and I think a lot of that has really stood the test of time with me, because lots of people ask, how can you be so disciplined? You know, I get up at 4 every day. I have these sort of daily non-negotiables that I always do every single day, and people say, how do you have the discipline to do that sort of thing? And I think that muscle was really built from my days doing music. So I think it's an important part of my story. If I'm going to put my whole story up into a video, I think that's an important aspect of it. So where are we up to? I've come back to Sydney, and I now am qualified to be an oboist, but not qualified to do very much else. So I start trying to get jobs, and I decided I need to get home, I need to get a job, and I start applying for things all over the place. So I apply for the receptionist at a local gym, and I apply for, you know, the receptionist here, or like just these really low level jobs. I'm coming back, keep in mind, with a master's degree and the start of a doctoral program. So I am not a unqualified person. It's just that I'm not really qualified to do anything except play the oboe. So people could see that I'm obviously an intelligent person. I obviously work hard and have dedication, but they were like, you know, I remember distinctly the guy who I applied for the receptionist at the gym, he rang me and said, I'm willing to give you the job, but I just don't think you're going to like it. Like, it is nothing flash. I don't have any career progression for you here. It is simply to come and be the receptionist. I was like, okay, that just doesn't really sound like me. Anyway, I applied for lots of jobs. I wasn't getting anywhere. It was all really distressing. And eventually a family friend who was working at a place called the College of GPs here in Sydney, a College of General Practitioners, was willing to give me a go at being the receptionist on the front desk of that college in New South Wales. And so that is what I decided I would go and do. And I got there and I did something that I have always done, and it's a lesson I learned from my mum, who just, when we were growing up, just said, just work hard at whatever you are doing, because you just never know where everything's leading. And so that's the philosophy that I have held for my entire life. And so I worked really hard at being the receptionist of this college, because there were career progressions at this college to move up through, you know, different program manager roles and then up to management roles and so on. And I could clearly see that there was those sorts of progression, and I'm just an ambitious person and I like to be competitive. So I worked really hard at being the receptionist there. I moved up the ranks of that college pretty quickly. I was running a program there, an education program there, and I sort of did that for a number of years. I eventually then moved to a different academic medical college called the College of Physicians, and I did a similar sort of role, and I kept moving up the ranks there until I ended up in the sort of 2 IC role to the Director of Education there. So I was embedded in the medical education area and working with doctors on developing medical education programs for upcoming physicians and upcoming doctors. So I got a really, really solid grounding in how to develop curriculum, how to create educational programs and all of that sort of thing. And I think that part of the story is really important, because I have that background in education that has really stood the test of time in terms of all of the things that I'm doing now. And as I keep going with this story, what I have noticed with my life, and what I was saying before about just trying the best at whatever it is that you're doing at the time, is that everything that I'm doing now is really a piecing together of like this completely random sort of set of skills and qualification and experience that I have picked up and developed over the years. So I'm working at this college. I've moved my way up through the ranks, and I then along the way had met my husband, Paul, who we had eventually got married, and we had been married for a little while, and then I got pregnant with our first son, Caleb, and I went on maternity leave. So I left the college and I went on maternity leave, and while I was on maternity leave, I had Caleb, and then about 6 weeks after Caleb was born, I had this like tiny newborn baby. And instead of just being a normal person like lots of other people are and saying, I'm going to have this lovely year with my newborn baby, I was like, I'm not sure I can be at home with a newborn baby without anything else to be thinking about or doing. I think that's going to drive me crazy. And so, not because there was anything wrong with my baby or anything, I loved being with him and doing things, but he slept for many hours a day, and I was like, what am I going to do with the hours where he's sleeping and stuff? So I just was the sort of person who was like, okay, I'm going to need a little project to do while I'm doing this. So I decided to enroll in a PhD, as you do. So 6 weeks in, I have this tiny baby. I go to Macquarie University and I enroll in a PhD program, and I don't do it part-time. I enroll in a full-time PhD program with the intention of finishing it as fast as possible. Having worked with doctors for many, many years before that, one of the things that I really hated was that there was still a culture within the medical education and in the doctors' circles of women in particular. I had many meetings where I would turn up to give contribution at an academic level on education programs and be asked to make a cup of tea for the male older doctors. And I was sick of all of that sort of stuff, and I figured I'm going to go back to this workplace, because at that time I had all intentions of going back to the college and working there further. And I'm like, I'm going to go back there, and I'm going to go back with doctor in front of my name so that they stop asking me to make tea and I get treated as one of the equals in terms of my intelligence and the stuff that I thought that I could bring value to. So that was part of the driver for me wanting to do a PhD. As you know, I'd started that doctoral program back in London, and so in the back of my mind, I'd always wanted to actually get a doctorate. My dad has a doctorate, so it was something that's sort of in our family anyway, just in terms of being a very academic family. My mum's a professor in the university system. In fact, she was the dean of the Sydney Conservatorium while I was going through, so we've got a very sort of academic family that I had come from, and so yeah, just getting high-level academic degrees was sort of something that was a bit normalised in our family. So anyway, I decided that I wanted to have that, and I wanted to have that doctoral title that people could never take away from me, and I could sit in meetings and not be asked to make a cup of tea because I had doctor in front of my name too, and whatever. So it was sort of like lots of different reasons. And so yeah, I enrolled in this PhD program and I got started with it, and then the year of maternity leave sort of came and went, and I was in the middle of this doctoral program. I was on a different sort of scholarship type thing to do that doctoral program, so I was getting a stipend from the government to do that PhD program, and so we were bringing in a bit of money from that, and I just decided for that time I wasn't going to go back to the college and do my work at the college anymore. And then eventually I got pregnant with our second baby, Hugo, who was born 2 years later, and for anyone who's been around here for a while will know that Hugo is actually profoundly disabled. So we went through a just massive family upheaval, turmoil, crisis when Hugo was born, because he was not intended to. We were told he wouldn't live through the night, then we were told he wouldn't live till his second birthday, then we were told he would never achieve anything, sit up or hold his head up or anything, and he was just profoundly disabled. He had a whole bunch of physical abnormalities. It was just an absolute disastrous time. He spent most of the first couple of years in hospital, and the whole thing was just terrible. But I had actually also been on bed rest in the lead up to his birth because he wasn't growing and no one knew why, and they didn't know about any of his syndrome and stuff at that time. So while I was on bed rest, I was in the hospital for 6 weeks, and during that time I actually wrote most of my PhD thesis. So in some ways it was an unbelievable blessing because I'd had so much time to just be by myself, and I luckily had this great project that I could be working on rather than just sitting around in a hospital stressing out about why my baby wasn't growing. And so I did something really productive, and that's been another theme in my life of just when times of difficulty come around, I try and just be as productive as I can and focus on other things that I think are valuable to me. And so instead of just, as I said, just sitting around and being stressed and worried and reading magazines and finding the days pass way too slowly, I was working on writing the bulk of my thesis, because my thesis had got to that point. I was about 2 years into the PhD at that time, and I intended to try and finish it within about 3.5 years. So I got a good chunk of that done. Hugo was born. It was massive crisis time. And then he spent most of the first 2 years of his life in hospital. And so the PhD again came to be something really handy during that time, because I was able to sit by his bedside when he was in hospital, and we would have to stay overnight with him regularly. And I would just work on my PhD. So I remember distinctly that doctors would come round to his bedside, and many of them knew me because we were there so often and stuff, but like eventually some of them would be like, what are you working on your computer all the time? And I was like, oh, I'm just writing my PhD, I'm just finishing that off. And some doctors would say to me, many of them men, don't you think, dear, you should put that to the side and focus on, you've got a lot of going on at the moment, and maybe it's better off to come back to it at some other time. But in my brain I was like, first of all, I've done so much of this already, I'm determined to finish it. Second of all, it's giving me a fantastic distraction from just otherwise awful stuff that was going on. And third of all, I can't remember, but there would be a third reason as well. I'd just done so much of it by that point. So as I said, I'd written most of it. So I was just really fine tuning. I was like determined to get the thing done. So anyway, I worked on that. And then I got pregnant with our third baby, Archie. And so I was determined to get this PhD finished before Archie was born. So I had a deadline. Obviously, babies don't wait. So I had this deadline. I knew when the deadline was for Archie's birth. And I decided that I had to get this PhD finished before he was arriving, because having 3 little babies under 4, including Hugo with all of his medical needs, was going to be a complete disaster. So I decided I needed to get that done. And I handed it in, I think something like 2 weeks before Archie was born, and submitted it just in time for his birth. So that was a great achievement, and it was so relieving to get that done. That then got assessed, and I luckily, very rarely do people get PhDs through without any revisions needing to be made. I did have to make a few revisions, but there was nothing major. It was all really, really minor stuff. And by some miracle, or probably just my hard work on my part, I managed to get that PhD done and through without massive revisions needing to be made. And so that all got through, and then I graduated from that. Anyway, then I was back with nothing to do again. So Archie was by about one at this point. So I'd spent the sort of year with Archie, and we had Caleb and Hugo and just a lot going on with 3 little kids and all of that sort of stuff. So I did have plenty to do during that year. Archie had sort of turned 1, and I was like, I'm going to have to get back to work. I'm going to have to go and do something. So I spoke to the College of Physicians and the new Director of Education who was there, and I decided that I would go back and consult to the college doing some change management stuff. So my PhD had been around business and change management and corporate social responsibility and a whole bunch of things like that. And so I had this sort of skill set around something that was valuable to them at the time. And so I came back and helped them manage their big change management project that they were working on in the college at the time. So I came back and started doing that. And so then and this was all now about 10 years ago, which was when my business started. So I got back there and I was like, I just am not happy with this. My whole sort of philosophy on life had changed. I now had 3 little kids. I hated going into work 9 to 5. It was really, really difficult. Kids were sick all the time. Hugo was in hospital all the time. I was constantly having to ask for time off work. I just was like frazzled beyond belief, just in terms of, how much we were trying to manage. And I was missing stuff at the kids' preschools and, just all that sort of normal mum stuff that I just really, really didn't like. And I just wanted my own thing. And I just had this dream of having my own business, but I had no idea what that would be in. I thought maybe it would be like a consulting thing, working as a consultant, business consultant of sorts, with other businesses, given my skill set and my PhD in business and all of that sort of thing. So that was what I sort of thought, but I didn't really know what I was going to do. So one day when I was at college on my lunch break, I was sort of looking around, and I was always listening to podcasts and just always learning new things. So I've just another theme of my life has just been a massive belief and enjoyment in lifelong education. One thing I skipped over at some point is that I got a second master's degree before my PhD in public policy. So I've got 2 master's degrees and a PhD. So it's just like a theme in my life of just wanting to be always learning and always educating myself. And so I was just always listening to podcasts and doing little courses and all of that sort of thing. And I sort of stumbled across, and I'd always just loved interior design. And I'd just been, renovating our houses, and we'd been sort of flipping houses and buying and selling and doing them up and selling. So I'd sort of developed a skill set around renovation. I had a bit of a natural flair. So people told me for interior design, people were always asking for my help or to pick my brain about stuff and whatever. So I used to, started to think, I actually really do have a passion for this. I was one of those kids as a teenager who used to move my room around every weekend and restyle it and hang stuff on my wall in a different way, and always want like new sheets for Christmas and all of that sort of thing. So I'd always have this like love and enjoyment of interior design, and it always said I should have studied interior design at the end of school, but because I'd followed my sensible career path of following the footsteps with my music and stuff that I was already doing really well in, it was sort of something that just never happened. Anyway, so I'm there at the college. I'm working in this change management role that I was doing like four days a week, I think it was. And I wasn't really enjoying it very much. And so one lunchtime, I was just sort of browsing around on design blogs and stuff. And came across a design blog called, The Design Chaser, I think she's called. She's in New Zealand, and I'm pretty sure that's what her blog's called. And I was like, what's this? And so I was like, you can make a blog about interior design. This was 10 years ago. So, I mean, blogging was still a thing, but it wasn't as big a thing as it is these days. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a blog too. I'm going to start my own design blog, and I'm just going to do that as my creative outlet. I wasn't feeling like I was being very creative. I didn't really feel like, I was enjoying my role that much. And so I taught myself how to set up a website on Squarespace, which is still the website I have to this very day. And that day, when I got home from work, I researched how to do all of this. I watched, I listened to something on the way home on terms of how to, like sitting on the bus, and how to make a website and how to set up a blog, and started just upskilling myself on that, and got home and started making this blog. And so then I created this blog, which I called The Little Design Corner, which, had I known it was going to turn into what it's turned into, I would never have called it that. Some people love the name of my business. I really, really, really don't love the name of my business, but I named it The Little Design Corner. And I just started writing about stuff that I was liking in the design industry. I remember one of my first posts was like all about Muto, which is a brand that I liked, and I sort of did a whole post about sort of different products that I liked from them. And I did write-ups, and I did little series called Mums in Design. I interviewed like interior designers and talked about their mum, how they were juggling being a mum and running their business. I just all sorts of things that just out of pure enjoyment. I set up an Instagram page. Instagram was still not as big as it is today back then, and I got started with just posting some stuff on Instagram, not knowing at all what I was doing. And I then just sort of was doing that for a little while. I also was brave enough to start telling some of the mums at the boys' school. So Caleb had started preschool by then, and I was talking to just some of the mums about this thing that I had started on the side, and this hobby that I'd started on the side, and maybe they'd started following me and whatever. And a few of the mums were moving house at the time. And one of them in particular said, well, why don't you come and help me style my house for sale? They just finished renovating. They needed some other bits and pieces. Then they'd suddenly decided that they wanted to sell the house. And so I remember distinctly charging her $1,000 to do this huge styling project of just, putting in new pieces and helping her buy furniture and just create the house and make it look really pretty for sale. Not styling it with like my own styling stuff or anything like that, anything I owned, helping her buy stuff she could take to the new house and all of that sort of thing. And I spent probably 40 hours of my weekends and my after work hours and driving the kids around to stores to like look for stuff for her, and like just, hustling my way to helping her with this project, which I just frankly could not believe that someone was paying me any money to do something that I literally would have done for her for free. I loved the design side so much, and so I was just in my element. I was just loving every second of it, and I suddenly just got this bug for starting this design business. And so I started to take it more seriously. I started to research more about how to run a business, how to set up my business properly, how to, start working with clients, how to actually do proper lead generation, and how to do all of these sorts of things to make myself a bit more legitimate and start to get real clients. So she paid me some money, and then another friend, I did something for her. And then I started to get, through word of mouth and through the lead generation stuff I was doing, started to get some real clients, i.e. people I didn't otherwise know before I had started, people I didn't really know in the real world, who started paying me to come and help them with styling projects, which I just could not believe. And so I was doing all of this in my spare time, on the weekends. After work, I would go, Paul would look after the kids and get them ready for bed. Paul is super supportive. So, I'm lucky to have had such a supportive partner, husband through all of this, because he just wholeheartedly supported me in all of this and just looked after the kids and stuff when I was off doing other things. So in the evenings, like clients, that suited them quite well because they were working as well. So they were happy to have design consultations and meetings and stuff in the evenings and on weekends. And I was then happy to do that because I was obviously still working in my day job. So I did that for probably 9 to 12 months. And that was pretty hectic. So Paul had to take kids out on the weekend to the park and stuff by himself. And that was a little bit of a hectic time just in terms of me trying to juggle essentially what was 2 jobs. And eventually, after about 9 or 12 months, I was at the point where I hadn't quite replaced my salary from my corporate job, my job as a change management consultant. That was like a 6-figure salary, but I was well on the way to replacing my salary. And I could see that if I gave away the work I was doing in the daytime at the college, I actually would be able to put a lot more effort into the design business that I had now grown. and I would then be able to get that to the 6-figure business and replace my salary, and also just have so much better quality of life because I wouldn't be running in and out to the city all the time. I could be there with the kids in school holidays, and all of that stuff just became a non-issue for us. So it was really, really important to me to make sure that I didn't do anything risky. We needed my salary. We were relying on my salary at the time in terms of like just paying the mortgage and all the stuff we all have to do. And so I didn't want to have to, risk anything by giving up the job before I had actually replaced my income. So anyway, I did all that, and then I quit, and the business just took off. And so then I worked as an interior designer for 6 years. This is starting to get a bit long, so I'm going to keep things moving. So I worked then as a designer for 6 years. I had more and more projects, more and more high quality projects in terms of like full renovation projects and just like really fun projects to work on. I had stuff featured in magazines. I won a few design prizes, like all sorts of different things that were just really fun to be working on, and the business was growing and I was just having a really, really good time. After about 6 years or so, as this all was going on, in the back of my mind, I still was like, this, whole issue with working as an interior designer has one massive flaw. And the big flaw is that once my time is maxed out in terms of like having a full client load, once my time's maxed out, then my income, my revenue, my ability to make money is also maxed out. And that was starting to happen. So I had as many clients as I could take on. That's a really fortunate position to be in, obviously. But I now had capped my revenue earning capabilities at that sort of just over 6-figure mark, which obviously is fantastic and would be totally fine for everyone and for me. And it was fine for me as well. But I'm, as I said before, a very ambitious person, and I sort of always in the back of my mind thought that there was probably a different way to scale things so that I could make some more revenue that wasn't directly dictated by my time. And someone I knew someone I was in mother's group with, actually had her husband had this saying of the one thing that you want to try and do is to try and work out a business model where you can make money while you sleep. And this had just stuck with me forever. And I was like, I've got to find this business model where I can make money while I sleep, because this whole like working with clients and maxing out my time and working 50 hours a week on client projects, like that was really fun for the first few years, but then it got really hard work, and I was like, there's got to be an easier way. So obsessively been listening to podcasts, taking online courses, learning as much as I could about online business, and just always thinking like, what could I create? What course could I create? What, digital thing could I create? How could I scale my business? Obviously, you could scale an interior design business by just hiring junior staff and doing that sort of thing. But I had managed a team in my role back in the college. I'd had a team of like 30 or something, and I hate managing staff. Like I had learnt that, luckily, through my corporate experience, that I really, really, really don't like having staff. I don't like the whole HR stuff at all. And so that was just not something that I was interested in. I wanted a business where I didn't have to have staff. And so that was really important. And that's still to this day, really important. I did have 2 VAs until last week, but now I have 1 part-time virtual assistant who works with me remotely, who's fantastic. And I've got Paul, who now works in my business with me as well, which is something we're coming to shortly. But other than that, no staff. I do it all myself, and I keep the business at the point at which I can still manage it on my own. And so this was something that was really important to me, and a real philosophy that underpinned everything that I was doing, and all the business models and stuff that I would, run through my head and think about and all of that sort of thing. Anyway, about 3 or just over 3 years ago now, I finally, after many years of thinking about an online course and which course should I do, and procrastinating around it and trying a few things out and having a few ideas, but then seeing some like big influencer start this course. Like one in particular that I remember distinctly is I'd wanted to do a course on how to renovate your home. And I thought, this is going to be a good course. So this is one I'm going to do. My community at the time was probably about 10,000 Instagram followers. And so it wasn't tiny, but it wasn't massive. And I remember distinctly that I was just about to like take action and finally be brave enough to do this course on how to renovate your home. And the Three Birds Renovations girls decided that they were going to bring out a course, something similar to that. And I just remember feeling so deflated. I was like, now that's, no point doing it. How would I ever compete with their course or anything? I have a completely different view on that sort of thing now. But back in the day, that's how I felt about it. And I was like, back to square one. And blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I then signed up for a program called Tribe, which is a program, because then I thought I might start a membership. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do a membership. I'm going to create this thing. And then I had this whole other business idea, which was all about something called the Music Practice Club. So my son had just started playing the violin and I was helping him with his practice all the time. And I'd had this really good idea, which I still think is a very good idea, about creating this music practice club for kids with like lots of fun stuff and this like thing that will encourage them to do their music practice rather than me having to, like parents having to fight with them to do their music practice all the time. So I really put a lot of effort into this. I created like all these little icons and got all these little graphics and illustrations drawn by a professional illustrator. I like went all in on this thing using that Tribe program with Stu McLaren. That's the program that I was doing at the time. And so, by the way, one of the lessons from this is like I've tried a lot of things to get to where I am, and like so many of them have failed, or I've put to the side, or I haven't followed through on, or whatever. So if you're the kind of person who's started and stopped a lot of things and you think that like it's never going to happen for you, you've just got to keep trying more and more things, because one of the things will eventually take off and work, because that's been my experience. Anyway, I was doing that program and I was going to go to Canada because he has like a sort of in-person meetup thing as part of his program. And so I was like, I'm going to go to Canada. I'm going to go and get some inspiration and just hang around with other online entrepreneurs and just get a bit of a thing for that. So I decided I was going to do that. But then I was feeling really embarrassed because I didn't want to go there and be like one of those people that was standing there where everyone's like, okay, what's your membership program all about? And I'm like, oh no, I've flown from Australia all the way to Canada and I don't have any program. Like people would be like, okay, that's like a complete waste of money. Like, what are you doing? So most people wouldn't care at all, but because I worry about what people think about me, because I'm a people pleaser, I was like really hyper worried about this. So I, at the same time, had just started noticing on my Instagram page, which as I said had about 10,000 followers or so at the time, people were starting to ask me a lot of questions about the posts that I was putting up, because I was still working with design clients through all of this, because I still had to pay the bills, obviously, with, you know, the reliance of my income and my salary and the revenue I was making from my business. I was still doing that sort of client work. And I was posting up all the sorts of stuff that I was creating for them, including posts about the SketchUp drawings that I was doing for them. So I was posting up, you know, the drawings that I do for their kitchens and all the sorts of different stuff that I'd work on for my design client projects, the actual behind the scenes, if you like, of what I was doing. And more people were starting to ask me, like, what is this software that you're using and how do you do that? And, you know, do you teach any courses on how to use that software and stuff? And I'm like, hang on a minute. Like, I think there might be a course in this. And because I had this like trip to Canada coming up and this feeling of like, I don't want to go there being a loser who hasn't actually done anything, and I want to actually have taken action on something and actually have something to show for it, I was like, you know what? I'm going to see if maybe my community wants a course on SketchUp. So I put it out there. I was like, I'm thinking about creating this course on SketchUp, and would anybody be interested? And I got all of these DMs from people saying, yes, I would love a course on SketchUp. I would love to learn how you're doing that, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. So then I like learned how to make a sales page and put up like a little payment gateway. And I'm like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-sell this thing and I'm going to see if anyone buys it, I'm going to make it. So I hadn't made anything. I'd made like the outline of what the course would involve and, you know, the steps that would be involved in the program and things like that. But I didn't actually, I hadn't really made any of the lessons or videos or anything that was part of the program yet. In the back of my mind was like, if I get like 5 people to sign up or whatever, A, like, can you believe that would happen? Like, that would be so awesome. But B, then I'll make the program, because then it'll be worth making. I won't be wasting my time making something that people don't really want and all of that sort of thing. So I put this call up and then I said, okay, the sales page is live. The course is going to go live on X date, which I think was about 6 weeks later, which was like a very aggressive time frame for someone who hasn't ever made an online course before. But don't forget that I have that background in sort of curriculum development and stuff. So I wasn't like lacking in confidence in my ability to actually put together a solid educational program. It was just more the case of like, that's a lot of work ahead of me for 6 weeks away to get that delivered. But I thought, you know, I'm a hardworking person. I'll be able to work it out somehow and whatever. So anyway, I put this thing up and like within about 5 minutes, I got my first sale, and I still have the screenshot on my phone. I should have dug it up for you for this little story or long story that it's now turning into. But Yeah, I've still got a screenshot of that. Actually, I forgot to take a screenshot of the first person that purchased, but by the time because the second person purchased like quite quickly after, and so then I was like, okay, I better get a screenshot of this because one day I might look back on this and be really proud of myself, which I do still. So I carry it around still to just remind myself. And so I've got this screenshot of like the first 2 people that bought within about the first 15 minutes of me putting up this pre-launch sales page for this brand new course that I had not created yet and was going to be delivered in 6 weeks, which was just a week or so before I went to Canada. So I could say that I had my product, which was my new SketchUp course, when I went to Canada and people asked me what I did. So anyway, long story short with that, I had that sort of pre-launch period open for about a week or so, and I ended up making, I think it was like $39,000 or something in sales from that first course. I need to dig up the real numbers. I can't really quite remember, but it was something like that, like something so much more than I thought it was going to be. And I think it was about 115 or 20 people or something who first enrolled. And P.S. if any of you are those first people, thank you so much, because you got my whole online business started. And those people are still very special to me, all those founding students from many years ago. So anyway, so that course launched and it was a great success and people were loving it. And, you know, there was obviously some stuff that wasn't needed tweaking with it and improving with it and stuff. And so I used that as an opportunity to sort of reiterate and like change the course, you know, just make improvements to the course. And so I then started to, just improve the course over time and just get lots and lots of really great testimonials from students who had been through it, who loved it, who had got great results from it. And I just could not believe it. People were writing to me saying they felt like their whole life had changed. They now had this whole new lease on life, this whole new enjoyment of like learning this new software, how they wanted to start their own design business, or they wanted to start a business helping other designers with SketchUp, or like all these things. And I was having all these stories from women and from mothers who were starting to do things with their life based on this SketchUp course. So here I was just thinking I was creating this SketchUp course just to, teach people how to use SketchUp. And I was finding I was just getting these DMs and messages from people about how it was just literally changing the whole trajectory of where their life was headed. And that was so powerful for me, and just such a sort of just sparked me to be like, okay, I am now going to start helping all of these people with like basically what I've done. I'm going to share everything that I have learned in my own lessons along the way of growing and building my own interior design business, which was really hard because the industry is very closed in terms of like people sharing information about this stuff, and especially about how to grow your business and things like that. People don't share about any of that stuff. And I'm like, I would have loved to have a platform where I could visit when I was first starting, or even as I was like not first starting, where I could learn about all different business skills, where I could learn about, how to run my business, how to find clients, how to, and then also build community around that too, because I was working in an office in my house by myself and I didn't have a community of designers around me. So I got my whole like Facebook group going, which now has like 11,000 members in it and things. So I just wanted to build community around the interior design industry and to build what I am trying to build out as the best platform for interior designers to, just to be able to upskill and grow their skills to make and grow their own profitable businesses. So that was sort of the driving force, and still is the driving force behind what I do and why I get up every morning and why I work so hard and all of that sort of thing. And obviously the money that comes with it is, like, I'm not going to pretend, not a great thing as well, but the initial driver, and I think that's another really important lesson, is that the initial driver was never money. I never started the business, the interior design business, with the intention of wanting to make money. I wanted to do it because I had a passion for it and I knew I wanted to work for myself, but it wasn't a money driver. And then the same with the online course. It was more like, I need to like not be embarrassed when I go to this like conference. So it wasn't really like, I want to make this like multi-million dollar business. Like I never, ever have gone into anything ever thinking like that. So I think if you do go into it thinking like that, it's very unlikely that it would succeed maybe in the same way that my business has, because I lead purely with free value. I give away so much of my knowledge completely for free, because I know that firstly that's helpful, and firstly not all people can afford to pay for my courses and that sort of thing. So I give away as much as I possibly can for free. But secondly, I know that by leading with that free value, people learn to get to know my personality. They learn to trust that I know what I'm talking about. They, just like sort of learn that, my teaching style, all of those sorts of things. And that all comes through from the free stuff that I give away, that then what you find is that the money starts to come back to you as a result of that. So that's been the way that I've run, and the philosophy that I have run my entire business on, and it's worked really, really well for me, and the one that I'm going to keep going with for the rest of as long as I'm doing this for. So that's pretty much sort of where it got to. So then I built out other courses. I've got a whole business course platform. I've had some wins and losses along the ways as well. I had a business coaching program that I started and then decided I hated, so I shut down and refunded people $100,000. That was last year. So I've got lots of other stories along the way that I can share at another time, but I don't want to make this video so like super long. Hopefully you've put a podcast on, put this in your ears and gone for a walk or something by now. But yeah, that's that. So then over the past, so since that first SketchUp course launched, like as I said at the beginning, I think of this video, I've made nearly $5 million. I think it's about to tick over 5 million in the next couple of weeks, which is just so unbelievable. And our life is obviously changed from the money that's coming in. This is like a very low cost business. So a lot of that sort of comes through into us. We have to pay tax and all of that sort of thing. But, like we have made a significant, change in our financial circumstances as a result of that. But even more important is my husband left his corporate job at the beginning of last year because he, was sick of working in the corporate world as well. He got a payout from, it's a long story with him, but he, decided he didn't want to have to rush back to work and do another corporate job. And we were luckily in a financial position where we had the option for him to then leave the corporate world as well. So he now works in the business with me and does his own whole range of different things. He's got his own YouTube channel. He's starting his own thing as well in terms of being a creator as well, like I do. And he does jiu-jitsu every day, and he just basically lives his best life. And we are both here for the kids every single afternoon. And, we're just like seriously living the dream of just like a family that is working hard, but like trying to bring value to the world and just put things out into the world and see what happens and that sort of thing. So that's the story. I'm trying to think if I've forgotten any of the major pieces, but that's really the sort of crux of how I came to be where I am now. More recently this year, I created a new course called Online Course Creator, and that course teaches people how to create their own online course. So as I said, I've obviously got that background in curriculum development and in educational design and that sort of thing. And so I was using those skills to create that course combined with my own personal experience and skills in developing my own many online courses now. I think I have about more than 20 online courses now that I sell. Some of them short courses, some of them my longer signature courses. My SketchUp courses are still there for sale as well, and they're probably still my bestseller as well. So lots and lots of different courses there now for people. But yeah, more branching into, as well as the design side, helping other people to do what I've done, which is to scale my business online with online courses. So I have lots of people in that sort of community that are not designers, nurses and builders and I'm trying to think, like just people from all sorts of walks of life in that program. So it's not a program specifically for designers. It's sort of more an online business training program and creating your online course. And so that's been this year's project, which has been really fun and takes you up to the current day of where I have got to. Where things are headed, I don't know. We're just ending this year and we're about to go away. We're actually about to move house, and then we're moving house so that we can renovate this house. And then we're about to go away to Byron. We go to Byron every single year. So we're going to go away to Byron. I'm going to spend time in Byron thinking about what 2023 is going to bring for me and the business and where I want to take it next year. And that brings you up to speed. So anyone who's been wondering the origin story, that is basically it in a nutshell. I've left lots of bits out, I'm sure, but you get the sort of gist from it. As I said, I wrote that post about the 61 steps from 0 to 4 million in revenue about a couple of months ago. So I will link that to that in the description so you can have a read of that if that's also of interest. Otherwise, thank you if you've watched all the way to here, then thank you, because that's actually I said it's not going to be a long story and it's turned into we're going 43 minutes now. So thank you if you've stuck all the way through to here. I'm sure most of you will have dropped off by now, but that's the story. Thank you for watching. We will be back to some other sort of videos of trying to be helpful in the next coming videos, but I still hope that telling my story is a helpful thing to do and brings some inspiration, or at least helps you to know that I am just a completely normal person who took action on something. That's really the main thing I want to leave you with, is that all of the stuff that has come for me has just come from trying not to overthink. I am an overthinker, but I do try not to overthink, and I'm much better at it these days than I used to be. And just try stuff, put stuff out there, not be worried if things fail. Like my coaching program that just ended up being something that the people love, the designers love, but I just was not getting as much enjoyment out of as I thought I would. So just try things, put things out into the world, and just be brave enough to do that, and you just never know where things might head. So, and work hard. That's the other thing, is that I do have a ridiculous work ethic. I think I work harder than many people, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I know there's the whole like hustle culture, and you're not meant to be too I work hard. You're meant to be not making people feel bad about themselves, and I do understand that, but also I'm not ashamed to say that any of this has come easily. It's come from seriously hard work for a very long period of time, and just consistent action taking over a very long time. So it's not a quick fix. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. You're going to need to go into it with passion and determination and consistency and work ethic if you want to see success and make something of value in the world. So hopefully some of those are interesting, important lessons for you, and that this was inspiring or helpful in some way. Please write to me or comment if you've watched all the way to here, so that I know, or just if you wanted to comment and let me know of, whether this was helpful. I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, I will catch you in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.